John and Morin, who had just barely survived the tar pit, were walking back to the camp when they heard the sound of a spaceship's engine. They followed the noise, climbed a hill, and saw Captain Victor and his family getting their spaceship ready for takeoff. Since they had used most of their fuel to rescue the blonde boy, they didn't have much left. Their plan was to use what they had to escape the planet. But Morin told them their ship was too heavy and they didn't have enough fuel to get through the atmosphere. They would run out of fuel before they reached space and would crash. Victor refused to believe her and insisted on launching anyway. While they were talking, John snuck onto the spaceship, opened the cockpit door, hit the emergency stop button, and then used the communicator to call all the survivors to a meeting. There, John told everyone that according to his wife's research, their planet's orbit had changed, and it would soon get dangerously close to the sun. The temperature would rise until everything on the planet was burned up. Morin was inside the spaceship, trying to figure out how to make it lighter so they could use the last of their fuel to escape the planet's gravity and be rescued by the mothership. At that moment, a picture on Will's t-shirt gave her an idea. She quickly went outside and announced that they needed to strip off all the parts they didn't need to make the ship light enough to fly, including the navigation system. But the navigation system is like the spaceship's brain and is needed for takeoff. Morin then suggested that they didn't need to fly the ship from the inside. She said that in the early days of space travel, NASA's capsules were just like tin cans controlled from the ground. They could use that old-fashioned method to launch from the planet. After that, they started taking the spaceship apart. Morin met with her daughter Judy, who told her about how June had stolen her sister's identity. They then drove back to the spaceship. Inside, Morin saw her son with June, so she sent Will away and tricked June into going into the storage room, then locked her inside. June tried to use sob stories to get sympathy, but Morin didn't fall for her tricks anymore and didn't trust her at all. As Morin was about to leave, June threatened her, saying she had messed with the escape ship. Morin didn't believe her empty threat and turned to leave. Morin found John. Because they had taken so many parts off the spaceship, it could now only be flown by hand. Choosing a pilot was now their biggest problem. John and the others were looking at data on a computer. Because of the incredible force during takeoff, the pilot would probably pass out, so they needed the person who would wake up the fastest. It turned out that John woke up the quickest, so he was the only person who could do it. But John refused, not wanting to leave his wife and children. Morin reminded him of his promise to come back to them safely. They had a family meeting, and after talking it over, they agreed to let John be the pilot. Before the real launch, they did a practice run. They used ropes tied to a hatch to feel like gravity, and John was put under more and more force until he passed out. He woke up a short time later and, with his wife's help, continued to fly the simulation. But he was still too slow, and the first try failed. They then did several more practice tests, but it was too much for John's body, and they had to stop to let him rest. Just then, they got a message from the mothership. Because of the black hole, the ship had to leave this part of the universe in 24 hours. If they couldn't get on it by then, they would die with the planet. Will went to the storage room where June was locked up. She told him that other people could fly the spaceship and it didn't have to be his father. Just as Will was about to ask more, his mother called him away. After a short discussion, Don showed that he knew a lot about the spaceship. That's when they remembered that Don was the ship's repairman and knew everything about it. He knew the spaceship better than anyone and was asked to help, but at first he said no. As he was walking away, Judy caught up with him. She convinced him and he finally agreed. After that, the two men did the test together and surprisingly, it worked on the very first try. But with time running out, they didn't have a chance to do a second test. John said goodbye to his family one by one, and Don asked Judy to take care of his pet chicken. With everyone watching, they got into the vehicle and went to get the spaceship ready for takeoff. Morin also went back to the spaceship to start the launch sequence. The two sisters sat nearby, ready to watch. A tearful Will was very worried about his father. He then went back to where June was being held and asked who could fly instead of his father. June opened her backpack and showed him the head of the alien robot. She said they could bring it back to life. Will said no, feeling that it was his fault the robot had turned bad. June insisted that this time they could make it good if he would just open the door. She said they could go together and save the robot and it could take his father's place so he could come back. The young boy was deep in thought.